Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about sealers. So, in this video, I'm going to delve a little bit more into what sealers are, how to determine the difference, which one is best for your property, what you have going on, and kind of go into the details as far as the foundational pieces of information in order for you to be able to identify which sealer is best for your project. Now, understand this: there is zero sealers on the market that doesn't come with a pro and a con. The question is, what con do I want to deal with? And then your options as far as what pros and what cons depends on what you're working on and where it's located. All of these different variables can change if it's indoor, outdoor, kitchen, dining room, bathroom, shower. When you change the variable of the location of the material, then you determine the material that you have. Then you look at the options of sealers for those materials, and then you best select which pro and which con you want to deal with. But the biggest takeaway of today's video: there is absolutely no sealer that has zero cons and all pros. You got to be able to identify and understand which con you want to deal with because they all come with maintenance. Now, every maintenance option and every maintenance solution comes with an associated cost. So it depends on how much do you want to spend on maintenance. Maintenance is inevitable for anything in life. You must maintain whatever it is that you buy, a house, a car. It doesn't matter. There's always maintenance involved. The question is, how much do you want to pay for that maintenance? And then also frequency. So I preface this video by going over those details with you because what we're going to cover today is literally foundational information. I'm not going to tell you which one to use where. I'm going to share with you what the differences are with the different types of sealers. And then from there, we'll piggyback and create more videos, and we're going to break it off into sections and going over literally pros and cons by using X type of sealer on X type of tile located in X type of location. So this is one of those series where it's just going to continue to build and build and build upon each other. But today it's literally just the foundational information. So if that interests you, sit down, grab some popcorn, let's go over this together. I'm going to do my best to make it as concise as possible, but I can't overlook key pieces of information that's going to help you identify and help you with your project at home. If you want a quick 2-minute drill of what sealers are, what they do and what they don't do, check out Earl's video in the playlist, the 2-minute drill playlist. You'll see sealers on there. Click that video. Then you'll get the quick 1, 2, 3 from Earl. All right, but right here, you're in the long story, and we're going to go over it all. All right, so let's get it going. So we're going to start off with sealers. Okay, number one, first thing to understand with sealers is that sealers do not seal the way that you would normally think that they seal. So when I think of sealers, or when I used to think of sealers, I think of things like great stuff. I think of caulk. I think of asphalt, that sealer coat, that top coat. You know, I think of these different types of materials that what they do is they completely blanket or fill a void, making it where there's a barrier between all things and the material that you're putting it in, right? So like great stuff, that stuff is awesome, right? You put it in the middle and between any gaps, it seals the gaps. You think of caulk. When you think of caulk, you think of showers, bathrooms, doors, where you go ahead and you fill in caulks. And what did you just do? You sealed your door. You sealed a grout line. You sealed these items because you closed them. In this situation, sealers don't do that when in regards to natural stone, grout. Well, grout, it kind of can if you deal with color sealers, but we'll go over that later. But don't think of sealers in the sense of closing something off. Think of sealers in the sense of limiting absorption rate, and then from there building on the pros and the cons that you want to deal with. All right, so I'll get going. So with sealers, that's the definition of sealers, so keep that in mind. When you think of sealers, there's basically two categories. Category 1, Category 2, think topical. Category 2, think penetrating. also known as impregnating or impregnators, okay? So you have topicals and penetrating / impregnating sealers. For the case of this demonstration, we'll just stick with penetrating because that's probably the easiest for everybody to understand without me confusing anybody. But when you hear me say impregnating sealers and penetrating sealers, think of the same thing. It's penetrating, it absorbs in. So this right here, those are your two categories. Learn it, know it, understand it, because from here, it goes into another tree. So when you think of topicals and penetrators, number one is application of. Any sealer that you use, whether it's a penetrating sealer or a topical sealer, it is applied topically. What it does once it applies is what changes. Penetrators penetrate. Topicals remain on top. Okay? So when you think of topicals, think of two basic, but not limited to, because there's even another tree that stems off. But for the purpose of the video, we're going to stop at just these two and do the same thing here with penetrators. So when you have a topical basically, you want to think acrylic, and then you want to think polyurethane. Okay? When you think of acrylic is easy. Think of it as wax because, well, it is, right? So with acrylic, think wax. With polyurethane, think epoxy. A lot of people think of epoxies, can understand what epoxies are more than polyurethanes. So in this case, just like impregnating sealers and penetrating sealers, think of epoxy when you hear me talk about polyurethanes, but basically polyurethane is an acrylic on steroids. Totally different technology, totally different things, but think of this as on steroids. And then also later, when we get into talking about how to remove it, steroids versus easier, okay? So when you come over here to penetrators, penetrating, you have water-based, and then you have solvent-based, okay? The good way to think about the difference between water-based and solvent-based is that they both act similarly. The difference is that water-based molecules, a little bit bigger, doesn't get into all of the pores like solvent would. A solvent-based impregnating sealer gets in everything. Any little crevice, any little hole, any little microscopic part of the top layer, it penetrates into. So I'll take a moment to kind of go over that. So let's say you have a stone or a tile, right? A stone tile that's this thick. It's not going to penetrate all the way into here. It's going to penetrate right on the surface. But the thing is that it's not going to remain on the surface. It is only going to stay within the area that it penetrated in. When you think of polyurethanes and acrylics, when you have your tile there and it gets applied on top, it remains on top. Now the question is, how on top does it remain? If it's a polyurethane, mostly all of it. When you think of acrylic, now we got to think of terms of percentages and solids. So real quick, with acrylics, you have 7%, 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%, 27%, 29% solids. Basically, all that means is let's do easy math. Let's do 20% solids, right? So you apply 100% of the product, but once it evaporates and it dries, 20% of the product is what's left behind. So I want to go into another tree based on that, because then that goes into waxes and why different people get quoted for 5 coats of wax, 7 coats of wax, 3 coats of wax, and it all has to do with the acrylic volume, the solid number. That's what determines how many coats you could put on in one shot. But we won't go there, but just think acrylic and polyurethane, okay? So those are your topicals, and then this is your penetrator. Let's go ahead and remove this. Okay. All right. Now, when you think of acrylic and polyurethane, think top, water-based, solvent-based, think penetrating. Now, how do both of these work? Okay. Let's go ahead and let's put 2 tiles together. Okay. Like I said earlier, Both of them get applied topically, except this one absorbs into the pores. Okay? This one over here gets applied on top and continues going on top. Now, mind you, this right here, this space is a grout line. This space right here is a grout line. Now, when you have a product that remains on top, in future maintenance, what ends up happening is that it peels. If it's in a location where there's a lot of sun, it can yellow. If it's in a location where it has a lot of foot traffic, it can peel by just the walking of your feet and just that traction that goes on. But you have a topical barrier and a topical layer. Now, when it comes to those topicals, those are the type of sealers that give you a high shine or kind of a matte shine, but they all give you some level of shine. There's not one completely matte topical acrylic or poly that I've come across that will give you no shine whatsoever. So, and then this is where now we begin to configure to your project and to your home, right? So as I'm talking, if you have a project going on, think about your project and associate it to the information I'm giving you, and maybe it'll help guide the way in which direction it is you're gonna go with. But this is the two trees that you're going in. So you're either on the penetrating side or you're on the topical side. So I'm going to continue going over some pros and some cons of each to kind of help guide you that way, right? So with the acrylic and the polys, you're on top. You have a layer on top. When you have this water-based and solvent-based, it penetrates, so nothing is on top. Okay. If you're in an area where there's going to be a lot of moisture and a lot of water, remember, this is topical, so moisture and water will want to evaporate up in any crevice that it finds available. And what ends up happening here is that because there's a topical, now the water is going to kind of go off to the sides, and then now you're going to have a whole bunch of discoloration going on right over here. And if you'll see, I have another video on the channel where I'm going over topicals versus penetrators, but actually showing you the difference and showing you what has happened to a particular tile outdoors. So if you're outdoors, a topical would not be recommended if evaporation is going to occur coming out of any grout joints. Now, let's say that outside you have like a stamped concrete patio. Well, with a stamped concrete patio, it's a block of concrete. It's just all concrete with a top coat on top of it. Nothing is gonna, no water, no evaporation is gonna occur, because now if you have stamped concrete, it's basically one big slab of concrete that makes it look like it has grout lines, but it really doesn't have any grout lines. So when moisture gets underneath this big slab, it's not going to make its way through the actual slab up to the surface. So that's where if you have stamped concrete, well, in this case, I'd say a polyurethane, because you want the steroids of topicals in an outside situation, especially if you're only going to probably redo it, strip it, and reapply it maybe once every 5 to 7 years. Where with an acrylic, you'll be doing that all the time. And outdoors, this would not hold up. So this is another example, unintentional example, but you would have your outdoor suggestion versus your indoor suggestion. And I would not want to do this indoors in a situation like this either, because now when you're dealing with polys, you're dealing with, like I said, the steroids of topical. Well, with polys, you're going to need super strippers. When you use a super stripper to remove a coating, now you got to deal with the inside of your home. What's your perimeters, baseboards, quarter rounds? Do you have china cabinets? What do you have inside your home? What do you have in that space where you decided to put a polyurethane? Because remember, that polyurethane needs to come off. So when it comes off, what do you want to deal with? So this right here is easily 3 to 4 times the cost of removing an acrylic. Much easier, easier to handle, minimal, I don't want to say damage, but minimal post-service touch-ups that might need to be done in different perimeter areas of your home. And we'll go over all those details in another video. But always think that there's always some sort of post something to whatever it is that you do. You just kind of want to determine which one it is and control it. So outdoors, indoors, steroids, non-steroids, Evaporation, no evaporation, helps guide your judgment. All right, so we'll go over there to the water base and to the solvent base of the penetrating style. All right, so now on the water base and solvent base side of things, this absorbs into the pores, which what that does is it doesn't prevent staining from entering. What it does is it prevents staining from going any deeper. So once something hits, so for example, let's call this a marble tile. We'll call that a marble tile, and we'll call this one a travertine tile, right? So both marble, travertine, two different tiles, but they both act the same way. They react the same way. They're both calcium carbonate stones. They both etch. They both require a sealer. In this case, with a marble or a travertine, you would want to go with a penetrating sealer, because also natural stone needs to expand and contract. It needs to breathe. It needs to allow evaporation to occur should water get into the grooves or into the pores. It needs an exit place. So, but the downside is that it penetrates, so literally there's nothing on the surface that's protecting it from any elements from actually making contact with the stone. So what ends up happening is that, back to the red wine example, if you were to spill red wine, on any one of these, it's going to make contact with the bare surface. And when it makes contact with that bare surface, what it does is it has a chemical reaction that results in etches. Some people call etches ring marks, water marks, drip marks, or even kind of like a water pattern, because when you put an acidic product on a calcium carbonate material, water is going to flow. And then when you see that pattern, you're going to be able to easily determine if it was water or even water that has more viscosity, a little thicker. You'll be able to see where it didn't continue to penetrate, but it kind of moved around, kind of like a gel type of a cleaner, where it's going to move, but not move very far like water would, right? So what ends up happening is that the red wine, because it's acidic and has a pigment, the acid etches the surface of the stone, and then the pigment, so I'll use this one for pigment, the pigment wants to absorb into the stone. But if you have a sealer in here, a penetrating sealer, it prevents it from going further down, which then makes it restorable. So what do sealers do? Sealers help prevent permanent absorption and transference of stains, of oil-based stains, of pigment stains, allowing it to become restorable. It doesn't stop it from actually happening. Now, if you wanted something to stop it from completely happening, that's when you would want to go over here to a topical. But now when you come to a topical, now you're dealing with topical issues. And then the topical issues you're going to deal with depends on where it's located. So if now, let's go, I'll piggyback off of this one, right? So let's think of both of these as an island in your kitchen, okay? You got an island in your kitchen. Your kitchen, you have cabinetry on the left, and you have cabinetry on the right. You have, the countertop is actually on, a cabinet, right? So let's make some drawers here. Please forgive my drawing. That's Earl's the better one at drawing. You'll see that in some of his videos. Not me at all. But right here, you got a cabinet, okay? You got a bunch of cabinets, kitchen cabinets, ugly kitchen cabinets, but they're cabinets. You understand what I'm saying? Over here, you got let me see if I could make a little profile, make it look a little better. And that didn't help very much, but there's the countertop. All right, so if you have a water-based or solvent-based, whichever one you want to go with, on your countertop, it's going to create an etch over here. Now, when it creates that etch on the side that just has a penetrator, it's restorable. So we could literally go over there, grind, hone, refinish, and feather out into the existing stone, only doing a spot call. That's it. Boom, like it was never there. Minimal cost, minimal disruption, and easy to just kind of blend out and feather out. Whereas if you have a topical, Okay, because I got a whole bunch of scribbles here now. Let's create something thick here so we know what we're talking about. So over here on this side, you got a topical. That same red wine makes contact over here on the topical. Acid, I don't care what kind of acid it is. It could be a diluted acid. It could be your bare bones and skull and bones. It could be your skull and bones acid. It doesn't matter. Acid eats no matter what. The question is, at what degree, at what level, at what strength is acid eating? And we know that red wine is acidic and has a pigment. Anything acidic eats anything. Think of Coke in your teeth. It eating the enamel. You know, whatever, anything acidic, it eats whatever it is that's in its path, depending on how strong it is. So when you have red wine that's acidic making contact with this topical, it is going to react with the topical. If it's an acrylic, if it's a poly, there's a little bit more resistance. And I want to point that out because those that kind of want to learn more about the polys and epoxies, I'm going to make a video on the different products that they come out with where you put like an epoxy top coat on top, UV ray coat it, and then now it's on top, making it etch proof, an etch resisting sealer. But those technologies are based on polyurethanes and epoxies, which then brings me right back to steroids, which then connects me right back to my countertops, and I'll get into that in a second. So with that said, you have your red wine eating away at the top. So now you're gonna have a whole bunch of, let's call them etches. You have a whole bunch of etches on your countertop. But over here, the etches are actually on the stone because of the way that this works. Over here, the etches are on the top coat. So what needs to be done over here to remove it? So over here, we already figured out that we could just come over here, just do a quick grind home polish, feather it out. This right here would literally take, to give you an idea, let's say 2 square feet of etching on a countertop would probably take an hour from beginning to end. From the moment you arrive, prep, set, do, refinish, seal, and gather your things, about an hour. Maybe a little more if you want to take your time and protect and all those good stuff. But you could average basically an hour. This right here, turn that 1 hour into easily a 4-hour project. Now, with that comes related costs, where this right here would be $350. This right here would be $750. So now there's an associated cost with the decision that you made for your countertop located in a kitchen where there's life. So now, if you have children, if you have a lot of parties, if you entertain much, you know, if you use your countertop to serve your food, if that's where the family gathers, if that's where coffee spills, orange juice spills, those are the things to take into consideration, because now the question is, how likely is my countertop going to going to make contact with anything acidic? And that depends on your home. I mean, we've gone into customers' houses where there's only 2 people living in there and everything is immaculate. They have coasters for everything. They're careful on where they pour things. They're careful about where they drink. You know, it's like, so it all boils down to you and your lifestyle. What's going on in your home, which then helps determine which way it is that you want to go with. So when people ask, well, what's the best sealer? There's pros and cons to all of them. It's which is the best one for you. So when we come into your home and we do an estimate, so on the CSI side of things, on our service side of things, when we come into your home and we assess the project, we're not just assessing the project, we're assessing your style of living. Like we could walk in and see, 4 pairs of tiny shoes. We see a dog bowl. We see, a nanny, a housekeeper. You have all these people going around, which then helps direct our suggestions. So all of these are the things that we take into consideration within a few seconds of just walking into your home when identifying which sealer it is to put on your stone. So now I'll continue and I'll go back and I'll bring in why I even drew this cabinetry, right? So remember this piece back here was, like a countertop cabinet, right? And over here, this is the cabinetry where your countertop is on top of, all right? If you use an acrylic, all we got to do is put a little bit of tape put a little bit of plastic, cover all of this with plastic, and because it's an acrylic stripper, we can control it. You know, not like a stripper for a polyurethane is also controllable, but the stripper that's needed to remove acrylic will not penetrate through the taped area. If you're dealing with the polyurethane, you need the super stripper for that. If you have it all the way across on your countertop and we got to remove polyurethane or epoxy that's all the way butted up against your top counter, oh, there's a very good chance this is going to get damaged. Very good chance. Same thing with over here. It'll eat through the tape. And then now it's like people say, well, why don't you use better tape? Well, the better the tape, the stronger the adhesive. The stronger the adhesive, when you remove it, it's going to remove what it was adhered to. So now the question becomes, what's your countertop made of? Is it laminate? Is it a laminate front? Is it custom made wood with a custom color stain? That's a big deal, because once this is ruined, if this was a color stained cabinetry all the way around, there's nothing that you can do to this one piece that's going to make that blend and look like the rest. Because general rule of thumb is you can't make something new look like it's old. And no matter how new the house is, let's say the house is 3 years old, right? So it's a new house. Well, so is the color or the staining. It's 3 years old. So now if a wood cabinetry guy got to come in there and got to recreate that custom color and just patch this area right here, it's going to be a lot harder for him to make 0-day-old stain look like 3-year-old stain, which then turns into redoing the whole thing. Now, how much headache does that bring into your life? Do you guys have the time for that? Do you guys have the ability to make that happen? And then that's where your choice of sealer comes into play. And then that's where our experience in dealing with different establishments, whether it's a commercial, residential, a large home, small home, it doesn't matter. That's where our experience comes into play. And then we go and we help devise and guide which way you should go with. All right. So that's just a quick, I can keep on going as far as this goes and come up with different suggestions. And I'll make more videos on that, so be on the lookout for that one. But now we'll go back to just the overall comparison of both penetrators and topicals. Okay? Now with water-based and solvent-based, no matter which way it is that you go, both of these apply, right? So I'll just do this because they both apply. But at this point, you could have what's called a color enhancing sealer or a non-color enhancing. So whether water-based or solvent-based, you could do a color enhancing sealer and a non-color enhancing sealer. So the only difference between the two is that there's a lot of stones that have beautiful reds and oranges, rust colors that's intentional, pink marble, onyx that has that see-through beautiful colors, slate has a lot of gorgeous colors. So whenever it is that you're thinking of your stone, when you wet your stone with just water, put it on there, does it enhance? And when it enhances, do you like the way it looks? So do you like what they call the wet look? Do you like it? If you like it and you want to go with a penetrator, then you would go with a color enhancing sealer. If you don't like it, but you want to go with a penetrator, then you would go with a non-color enhancing sealer. Now, the active ingredient that actually makes that happen is acrylic and silicone. Those are the two things that really bring out color in these stones when you use a color enhancing sealer. Now, when you use an acrylic or a poly, both of these are going to enhance it just by the way it works. So like, for example, if you're familiar with vinyl tile, normally in commercial establishments or residential basements, but if you're familiar with vinyl tiles, you'll notice that when you strip it, It's white, it's ashy, probably like marbles. But you'll notice that it's ashy when it's stripped. But then once you start applying the coat of wax, beautiful. The colors come out. I'm thinking in my head, I'm thinking about a checker pattern black and white tile. That happens and that black looks rich, the white looks full. Once you apply that coat of wax, let it sit, let it absorb, come back, put 1, 2 more layers on there, shines, gleams, looks fantastic. So that's what you would want to think of when you're thinking of your tile and whether you want to go with acrylic, poly, water-based, solvent-based, penetrating, topicals, and sealers. All right, so I know there was a lot of information that I just gave, and to be quite honest with you, I'm sure I can keep on going with a lot more. And that's why I want to make these videos a little bit shorter than I would normally do them. But we're going to go ahead and break down and start talking about actual use cases. Over here in our shop, we intentionally installed different types of tiles, and we installed them wrong because we actually wanted to show what happens when things are done wrong. And then we'll go over the associated costs of proper installation, and then trickles all the way down to what type of sealer. So with that said, I hope you found this video informational. Please like, subscribe, comment. If you are a homeowner, you found interest in this, please give it a like. You know, YouTube loves to see all this, and this is a lot of information that we've gone over the last 10 years with our customers, and we want to get it out to the masses. If you have a question, put it down. If you have a comment, put it down. If you have a suggestion, put it down. If you're a contractor and you're like, hey, I actually know about a topical coating sealer that won't enhance the color, you know, and is permeable, man, put it in the comments. Let me know. I'd love to give it a shot. I'd love to try it out. Again, the intention of this channel is to help all, okay? Share information, help each other, and let's get the right solutions for the right locations within or out of our home. Thank you. Join us on the next one. My name is Caesar. Like, subscribe, comment. Appreciate you being here.